Happy Sunday. Rare Sunday appearance. Hopefully, we'll have a little bit more of these as, you know, time. I'm echoing. Rare Sunday appearance. Hopefully, we'll have a little bit more of these. There we go. I'm gonna monitor the chat a little bit more, so I have the other screen up. We're probably this is probably one of the very few lives we do on a Sunday, but we will do more Sunday stuff. But it'll be pre-recorded stuff that we'll do on Saturday because my schedules on Sundays is kind of up and down, and plus we actually have the Game of Thrones screenings and the Game of Thrones itself. So we will be doing more Sunday stuff. It's not going to be Sci-Fi Center Live though; it'll be Sci-Fi Center Presents. I just decided to throw this one out there. Midweek, made a decision to do something like this because we've been inundated by current event stuff, current event pop culture stuff, which is all great. Don't get me wrong, but I thought that we would go get a break from that and start talking about some things that are a little bit more that are pop culture, but not in the same way that we, the high tension stuff that we always talk about. So today's topic is, and it's going to be a really quick show, it's going to be, as the title said, Cold War science fiction movies. I mean, the effect that the Cold War had on science fiction and horror during the 50s, 60s, and 70s, all the way through the 80s, it was profound. For those of you who are not really up on what the Cold War was, I mean, some of you weren't even born when the Cold War ended in the late 80s, early 90s, when the fall of the Berlin Wall, which I was born a few miles away from at a Berlin Army hospital. I'm a Cold War kid, literally born in Berlin, Germany, one of the major hotspots during the entirety of the Cold War. So my entire childhood. I was 16 when the Cold War ended, so my entire childhood, for the most part, was Cold War films. And the Cold War was a conflict that lasted from roughly the end of World War II, which is 1945, all the way up until 1989, 1990, depending on when you want to make the determination when the Cold War ended. The Russian Federation was founded in 1991, so technically that ended the Soviet Union. So I think it was December of 90, right around that general area. But the Berlin Wall came down in December of 1989. I remember watching it live. And that pretty much signaled the end of a lot of it. And then after that, the Eastern Bloc countries broke up. But one of the two major components about the Cold War were mass destruction, because we had mutual assured destruction. We all had, us in the Soviet Union, the other half of the Cold War for the most part, we had so many nuclear weapons that there was no way for one to launch and the other not be destroyed. And that kept us in check. But what it did, a fear that you basically just lived with as far as what the Russians were going to do. We knew very little about the Russians as far as accuracy, what they had, what they were capable of, even with all of our intelligence apparatus. And we lived in an open society, so they were always afraid of us. But we basically I grew up on an Air Force base, and we basically grew up under the threat of nuclear annihilation. And because of that, it became the basis of a whole lot of science fiction and horror. And xenophobia. Xenophobia is the other component of what brought us Cold War science fiction. Not knowing who your neighbor was, the Big Red Scare, spies, intrigue, things like that. Two of the movies that I'm going to cover on my top 5 had to do with not being able to trust your own fellow citizen because of the way the Cold War paranoia spread. I'm going to go ahead and bring in Thade, and he's going to have his own point of view. Thade, we're roughly around the same age. What did the Cold War mean to you? Can you hear me? Sounds like he's making a sandwich. All right, we'll go ahead and wait for Thade. Chime in when you get in, Thade. So yeah, it was radiation was another key component. Radiation was huge. I mean, like I said, I have a list of 5 that I'll count down from 5 to 1. That is
Sorry about that, William. I had to be away for a minute.
That's okay. So I have a list. Like I said, all of my list is going to contain fear of nuclear destruction, the radioactive results of nuclear practice, xenophobia, and just the overall threat of mass destruction. Before you came in, Tate, I was explaining what the Cold War meant for me as far as growing up in it. And since you're of a similar age, what did it mean to you?
It was a time of fear. It was a time of unknowing. Um, there was a lot of what ifs. You know, I remember doing the duck and cover drills. You know, when I was a kid, and when I got old enough to think about it, I started wondering, you know, what's this going to do if there's a nuke? You know, um, just remember a general sense of unease and kind of looking down on the communist nations. Uh, you know, because everybody said they were evil. You know.
Yeah, and let's go back to the term Cold War. One of the questions I always get to this day, decades after it ended, why was it called the Cold War? Well, it was the opposite, given the fact that we had nuclear weapons. The opposite of a Cold War was a hot war. A hot war would have meant nuclear direct confrontation with nuclear weapons. So what the Cold War primarily was is, for the most part, almost entirely, the Soviet Union and the U.S. never met on the same battlefield. We fought proxy wars. We fought in Korea. We fought in Vietnam. We fought in a whole bunch of other, I mean, Latin America, all kinds of other places where we had proxies, where we would set up governments and we would fund those governments and we would fight them that way. We never directly, openly, overtly confronted each other, because both sides understood that if we pushed each other into a corner, and we didn't know, we didn't know what could happen. It would be unpredictable. Even the Cuban Missile Crisis, right in the thick of the Cold War. I wasn't alive then, but all I hear about from my parents is how close we came in those 13 days in October to basically blowing up the world. Neither side wanted that. They would fight proxy wars all over the globe. Thousands of people would die, but they would never, even to this point now, if you look at the situation that's going on in Ukraine, both sides, both Russia and the United States, are doing everything possible to not meet on the battlefield themselves, because they know that is a corner of no return. So the Cold War became the name for it because of what we were trying to avoid, which was the hot war, which if that would have occurred, we wouldn't be sitting here doing this stream. I think the world would be a cinder at that point. So yeah, let's go ahead and say hi to the chat room before we go into our top 5. How you doing, Mwambe? Black Ops. Hey, yeah, I saw your message, dude. This is going to be a real short stream, so you'll be able to jump on and do your game one right afterwards. Yes, it was a political conflict. There was actual battles, though, because, like I said, the North Vietnamese army was, between China and the Soviet Union were propped them up, and the Korean War, it was the same thing. It was those two nations basically seeing us as getting too close to their borders, and that's why MacArthur was not allowed to go completely north. Remember, one of the reasons why MacArthur was removed by Truman is he wanted to go all the way up into China. He figured, why not take care of this threat now? Truman was like, wait a minute, we don't want to do that, because now we're talking about World War III, 7 years after we just ended World War II. And this time,
the rumor is that's what killed Patton too, because Patton didn't want to stop. Patton wanted to go after Russia.
And those guys were alphas to the point where they had won the previous war that they fought in, due to absolute annihilation. That's how you won World War II. That's how the Allies won. So now you're talking, but the problem with MacArthur was, even though he may have been right, the consequences of his actions, we're talking about a nuclear age where you're marching into a country that has a nuclear ally. With Japan, that was not, we were the only ones with developed nuclear weapons. We've been the only ones to use it since then. The only 2 times that a nuclear weapon has been used has been Uncle Sam using it. So yeah, we've been avoiding that for a long time. But while we've been avoiding that, we got some really kick-ass movies. So I have my 5, but I'm gonna go ahead and let you go first, Aid, and give me your number 5.
Okay, so my number 5. Hold on, let me bring up my short list. Uh, uh, okay, hold on. Let's see. The Thing.
Okay, which version?
Well, thinking more like the 50s version, The Thing from Another World, because it had more like Cold War themes. The more recent Thing was more horror, but it could also be considered, with the xenophobia and everything else.
All right, so the Thing is your number 5. It's funny because I actually have that one up because that's one of mine too, but I won't tell you exactly what order it's in because I have my 5 in order too. So let's go. The Thing of Another World. The Thing, 1951. Yeah, it is. It's a serious one because if you look at it, the Cold War had just started.
Yeah.
I mean, we were like knee deep in what the Cold War was, and it was it was still fresh in our mind. Remember if you look at it, we were just 6 years removed from having dropped the only nuclear weapons that have ever been dropped.
Yeah.
So that one was that one was huge. That one was I guess you could make an argument that this is the very first Cold War movie. So all right, so what was your since we had that's a duplicate, we'll talk about that one once I get to it. So what was your number 4?
The Day the Earth Stood Still with
Wow,
Michael Rene.
same as mine. David Earth still one of the same year. You know what's going to really suck if we both mirrored the same movies. If we did the same movies. There's still now. This was a different Cold War movie because it wasn't about xenophobia. It was about the actual destruction element of it. I mean, it was.
Klaatu
Remember,
came to make sure that we didn't kill each other.
well, not only that. Remember what his ultimate mission was. If you remember, right, his ultimate mission was that we because we were developing space travel.
Yeah.
And he didn't want us to take our buffoonery to
out into the stars.
Out into the stars. So that's really what they were doing, and that kind of basically painted us as a bunch of buffoons that accidentally got technological weapons and were now a menace to the entire galaxy. I mean, we were basically like apes that didn't know what to do with these brand new toys. So I thought that was hilarious. Let's see, David is still. So yeah, that was a very famous one. Immediately as he gets off the ship, they shoot him. That doesn't say much for us.
No, it doesn't.
And his big his big giant android pretty much could have laid waste to us. But and then this one ends up with a lesson that either stay on your own planet or stop blowing shit up. That's pretty much the message of this thing. And like I said, for 1951, we were closer to watching a whole entire nation having been hit. We were seeing the effects that Hiroshima and Nagasaki were having on people years afterwards. And now, by that point, the Soviets had developed their nuclear program with stolen secrets from us from Los Alamos. So yeah, we were. This was it. These are some movies that were knee deep into it as far as this one goes. But like I said, this is one of the few ones. This is one of the 2 that are on my list that were not xenophobia. And as a basis, I mean, all Cold War was about xenophobia, about us fearing the other guy. But this one was about the actual destruction of everything, us being able to export destruction. Because we had the space program, like we were talking last night, the space program ran alongside the nuclear program out of necessity. So not only were we trying to blow each other up, we were trying to launch it into space to blow things up. And now you have this intelligent life form that's came in. Wait a minute, you stay here. It's like that neighbor with the crappy yard and the engine hanging from the tree. We want
Yeah.
you to stay in your front yard. Don't come out here because the ramifications would have been obvious. I mean, our mentality, both the Soviets and ours, were basically to claim territory. And so,
Yeah.
if you go out to space with that mentality, you're not only do you have the means to travel outside of your own planets, you have the means that coexisted with it to blow up and kill a lot of things, and not just human. And so, it was interesting to see us from the point of view. Now, this movie's been remade. I thought it was a cool movie, but like I said, it was one of the remakes, and I have some remakes on my list that duel this. This remake took place outside of the Cold War, so its remake didn't with Keanu Reeves didn't have the effect that I thought. Well, one of the other movies that are on my list, one of them we've already hit on, which is a thing from another world. But what's your other movie? Because I'm gonna go. I'll do mine all at once.
My third one is going to be On the Beach,
I don't have that one.
which was based in Australia, and it was about a couple that knew that the nukes were coming, the war was imminent, and it's about their last hours.
I remember the remake of that. I remember that one. Armando Sante was in the remake. I think that I can't remember what year that was released. The remake was released, but I know that the original one was released in the Cold War because, like I said, all these movies are. And we're not talking about the Leonardo DiCaprio one. What year was The Beach released? Do you remember?
Let me look that up really quick.
1959.
59. Yeah.
So yeah, once again, we're on the beach. We're right there. We're right there with once again, we're only 12 years 14 years removed from blowing up a country.
Now, are we sticking to just sci-fi, or are we going to do other Cold War movies?
Dude, if you bring a romantic comedy in here, I'm banning you from the show.
Oh, I'm not.
If it's a comedy, you're teetering on extinction. I'll allow it. Who knows? I mean, you might come up with something good, but if it's like
My
the
number,
Three Stooges,
no. My number 2 is the original Red Dawn.
All right.
Still considered a Cold War movie.
Let's see. The title of the show was Cold War Science Fiction Cinema, but fine, oh no, it's just hold on, I got customers. That's just a little beep. Hold on, let me mute myself while you focus on your off-topic entry here. So go ahead and explain to the crowd and justify Red Dawn.
Okay, so Red Dawn is not generally science fiction, but it can be considered a Cold War movie, and it's one of the more influential ones. It's about a group of teenagers in Calumet, Colorado, that are their town is invaded by a group that's a combination of the Cubans and the Russians, and these teenagers have to learn to survive. This group of teenage boys has to learn how to survive, and because their town's taken over and a lot of people are killed. There's a lot of action in this movie, but it also shows just the tension of the time period. So it's a really good movie.
But are there any aliens in there? Is there any mutagenic effects from radioactivity?
If you're gonna give me a hard time about it, The Day After is another good science fiction nuclear movie.
The Day After, okay, so The Day After is a good Cold War. That is a good Cold War movie. That one scared. That one wasn't funny. If we're talking about the same one, The Day After, that's the one with James Bond in it. Is that the one that they showed up? Yeah, that wasn't cool because we were kids when that came out.
Yep, 1983.
Graphic. That was the most graphic I had seen that's a TV movie.
Yep.
That wasn't released in the theater. That was on TV. That was a 2-day event. I remember that. We were talking about that crap the next day because remember they showed the bodies.
Yep.
They showed the aftermath, and we're like, I'm 9. And they did that because they see most of these movies, even Red Dawn is a kick-ass movie. The original Red Dawn is a Cold War movie. It is definitely. But the day after, what they were trying to drive home the point of what would happen. Almost every movie that was released was basically make sure it's try to scare the hell out of people to never do this because we knew what would happen. And we did a good job. It never happened. Let me get back to the chat real quick. Elsa Christina, well, when many countries are okay, did I miss the first part of this one? Okay. Okay. All right, Elsa. I'm thinking this is being translated, so I'm gonna go ahead and try to answer this as best I can. Okay. Yeah, I know your first one says my country is blue. Where are you from, Elsa? It's just Elsa Christina. Just curious.
She's she's from Portugal.
All right, so Portugal, it's in Europe. So yeah, all of Europe was a threat because either you were with the Soviets or you were with us. So yeah, Europe was and hey Michelle, how you doing? Let me make sure that I'm not gonna. I almost highlighted that guy as a viewer. I'm like, no, it's the StreamYard duck is not here. All right, so countries, okay, so. Yeah, last night or this morning was it was fun. That's my favorite show to do. One of my favorite things to do. The Sci-Fi Center Presents stuff is really good, like what we're doing now. The pre-recorded stuff that we've done, it gives me more time. Today, I just wanted to throw something out there. There's just not enough straight up talking about entertainment and the bare bones of it. We get to talking about who's going to be in it, who's directing it, who's running the company, and that stuff is like I said, we still do that, but I just wanted to give people a break from that one. How you doing, Chappie? All right. Okay. Also, my husband freaked out in a good way last night. We were watching WWE's Extreme Rules and Bray Wyatt. Yeah, I was watching that. Mixed emotions about that pay-per-view. The women's match both women's matches were great. They had a ladder match. Bianca Blair did a great job of selling that. She's growing on me. The Matt Riddle match, I didn't think that needed to be a main event or near the main event. The whole Edge thing with Beth Phoenix, all that was kind of disturbing. Whenever I see chair shots like that, it's chair shots on anybody, man or woman, I always cringe because I know the concussion and the risk element, even though it is choreographed. An inch to the left or right, and the way they had her head there, it could be bad. But yeah, overall, I can see the improvement of Triple H helming that product, so I was a little bit happier with it. So, Michelle, listen, I can't go off topic because we know what happens when I start running my mouth around wrestling, but we'll pay attention to our next couple of shows when I start to focus solely on wrestling. I will bring you into the fold if you're willing to come in. Rocky IV is a Cold War movie, Black Ops, but you're smoking that fade weed. There ain't no science fiction up in there. But okay, that's fine. Rocky IV. You know what? We should have. I'm a sci-fi guy, but come to think of it, we should have broadened the topic to just straight up Cold War movies. But I'm not rigid. I'm not going to be like bouncing people out because they bring up Cold War movies because it's Cold War. The Red Menace, these are things that's what it was. That's what McCarthy called it. And like I said, a lot of it was hype. So Bad Pigs. These are confrontations that all happened during the Cold War. Michelle, William, my family left Ireland when I was a child because of my homeland Ireland was tearing itself apart with the war during the 90s. Yeah, a very famous war between Northern Ireland and Protestant. It was bloody. It was bloody. They just now in recent history reached a somewhat peaceful accords. And I remember Queen Elizabeth. It was one of the things that they covered when she passed away. She was a big part of that. She was a big symbol of that peace. So yeah. All right, Black Ops. Well, yeah, I meant between us and Russia, but there was conflict, just not. Yeah. It was a chess game. It was a chess game. It was it basically funded the nuclear industrial power for both of them. Russia had a failed economy simply because of the way The reason why we ended up outlasting the Cold War is because capitalism can always grow its economy, whereas communism cannot. Not in the way that they were doing it. The world has never seen really true socialism like that or true communism. It's seen socialist dictatorships. But the fact that when you create a commune or a communism, it is designed to be the benefit from the people. When the Bolsheviks came in, there were people starving in the streets because you had the czar basically eating up all the money and spending it whatever they wanted to spend. The whole point of the uh, the October, the revolution of everything was to put that power into the hands of the same people that were starving to death and that weren't part of the running hierarchy. But once Lenin came in and basically was the de facto ruler, that basically ended, that by definition was never the communism that Engels had drawn about. The manifesto did not call for a central one person leading. And once Lenin died and Trotsky didn't come in, and then you had Stalin, you had a central cultural personality, which basically defied all the tenets of what communism was. Communism and the hammer and the sickle was supposed to be for the workers. The workers made up for the entire population, most of the population of these countries. And it was described as a paradise where everyone had what they needed. Nobody starved. As long as you worked a certain level, you were taken care of. But the problem is you had a central leadership, and whenever you have a central leadership, that leader basically can pick conflicts and stuff that he gets the entire country. So when they go to war, when they declare war and they start to spend money on things that the worker has no say in, communism is over. So I don't believe the world has ever seen true communism. And that's why when you had the Cold War, you did not have a balanced economy that was being produced. We were always going to be able to outproduce the Soviet Union. We were always going to be able to, they produced a lot and they could carry out a lot of destruction, but they could not maintain these things because they did not have the proper input to their economy that you would need to do that. Whereas we did, the Western nations did, we exported and imported. The bloc nations were closed off. Every country that was under those nations pretty much was living in poverty. That's why they were fleeing. You didn't see very many people fleeing the United States to head over to Moscow unless they were fugitives. You didn't in Cuba, a communist nation. There's nobody on boats trying to escape Miami, Florida to get into Havana. It's the other way around. But they had that control. And like I said, communism was supposed to be a paradise, but it got corrupted. So we've never really seen true communism. But that's what the hilarity is about it. All right, the Twilight Zone was heavily influenced. Yeah, the early Rod Serling versions were definitely influenced by it. Let's see. We made so many movies during the era of our ways, and what could be the effects of the actions, and we always go cool story. But yeah, and realize that it's this stuff was so close to happening. I mean, there's been so many nuclear, especially when the age of computers came about and mistakes could be made. There was one incident. I mean, we've had guys Russians almost launched nuclear because they saw glitches on the screen. So it could have happened by accident. When you had so many weapons, you could have actually had a mistake. And we could just a mistake alone could have just wiped us out. All right, Dave, what was your next movie?
Yeah, my last and number one movie is a more recent movie, but the storytelling of it takes place during the Cold War, and in fact, the nuclear standoff there in Cuba. It's X-Men First Class.
Yep, that qualifies. I didn't quiz him on his movies prior to coming in because this isn't a pre-recorded one, and I just wanted to have a basic conversation. So I didn't know any of Thade's movies before he told me, even though we kind of like came up with some of the same ones, and I'll go into my justifications on mine. Obviously, we have The Thing as one of mine, but he's missing one big one for me. But we'll go into that because, like I said, there are some differences between me and his list. So let's see, X-Men First Class. X-Men First Class was I thought was one of the better of the X-Men films.
It is. It
Period.
is.
Period. I mean, to me, Days of Future Past and the first X-Men movie, X-Men First Class and Days of Future Class are always going to be my favorite ones. But there it is, and yes, it indeed took place during that era of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and a very
And
interesting story, very very well done story.
technically, Days of Future Past, at least part of it, takes place during the Cold War too.
Yeah, yeah, because of the time travel element. I love this. I don't, and I love this movie because continuity wise, the Fox X-Men movies, even though I like them, they didn't give a rat's ass about going from one thing to another. They just focused on whatever movie that they were making, and I really like this movie. I think, and Days of Future Past, I love it for the same reason. Um, these were loosely based on storylines, and remember, X-Men came out the year after the Cuban Missile Crisis. X-Men came out in 1963. The Cuban Missile Crisis took place the year before. So so to see them go back into that, and you know what? The funniest thing that you bring up here, even though X-Men is not cinema, X-Men is a byproduct of the nuclear age. Children
Yes,
of
it
the Atom.
is.
Children of the Atom. The mutagen gene was at the time explaining the fact that mankind's delving into nuclear research and nuclear everything, including, especially there was one particular mutant, Sunflower, that was directly affected by the dropping of the bomb in Hiroshima, where his mother was affected. But the entire mutant, the original reason why we have mutants, children of the atom, is because of that atom, because of the atomic age. So not only did you bring up a movie that makes up a Red Dawn, not only did you bring up a movie that took place and technically is a Cold War movie, you actually brought up a Cold War theme that really kind of covers a lot of different things. So, all right, so
And
those are your movies.
also remember the very first issue of the X-Men was revolving around nuclear bombs and Magneto's attack on Camp Citadel.
Yeah, because he had elevated the bombs into yeah, I mean, like I said, Stanley, 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 yes, I have rules. Yeah, Stan Lee was fought when he was in World War II. I mean, a lot of these guys that were making comics in the 50s and 60s had been up front in the war in Europe. Some of them were Marines and fighting in Japan. So yeah, they knew about a lot of that stuff. I mean, firsthand. I wasn't even born. By the time I was born, we were knee deep into the Cold War, and it was literally 29 years. I was born in 74. Born 29 years after. I mean, we were the fear had already set in. So, all right. So now we're gonna get to mine. All right. So what do you think what do you think my number 5 was? Is Fade? If you had a chance to guess.
I don't know. I know there's two there that were similar.
Yeah.
Maybe The Thing.
No. It's on there. Let me go ahead and give you a. Well, you'll see it once it comes up on the hidden screen. But well, I mean, you got a couple more seconds. It's a real big nuclear a nuclear
Godzilla.
age. Yep. Godzilla, probably one of the most important nuclear Cold War movies. And here's the thing about Godzilla, or Gojira as it was called.
Gojira.
Is not only is this a Cold War movie, 1954, we're right in it. We're in the first decade following the Cold War. Not only is it science fiction and it meets all those qualifications, but it is being told from a creation character from the nation that suffered the biggest nuclear consequences of all the participants. The only participant in the Cold War, because Japan is part of the Cold War as being our ally, and with China, going against China and the communist nations there, it is the only one of these people in the conversation that actually had to bear the effects of a nuclear detonation. So this is their foray into, and they created Toho created a lot of monsters that were all basically created from the nuclear consequences, but Godzilla being the most famous one. And we think of Godzilla now in a different way, but remember when Godzilla was created, it was in the shadow of Hiroshima. It was in the shadow of Nagasaki. So yeah, it is. Blade Runner is number one on other lists, but not particularly this one. There's plenty of lists where Blade Runner will be number one in 2049. Yeah, the atomic bomb woke up Godzilla. I mean, it was and in a way, in the nuclear testing and all that created and had mutagenic effects on all the monsters that they would create. It also had an effect because remember during the movies that the subsequent Godzilla movies, aliens came down, and Jay-Z tried to control or kind of like in the day of the Earth was still, but they had sinister purposes. Yeah, so this is Godzilla. Godzilla's big, so that's my number 5. Sorry, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, fun game during that time. But since you're a gamer, Jim, I'll allow it's not super accurate, nonetheless super entertaining and visually amazing. Yeah, and another game, Rainbow Six, took place in the Cold War too. More spy intrigue than anything, the nuclear age. But yeah, Call of Duty. Yeah. So yeah, Godzilla is mine. Very important movie. What do you think my number 4 is? And can anybody in the chat guess my number 4?
I'm not sure. I'm going to let you tell me.
I'm going to give it. Well, see if the chat gets it. You guys are no fun. All right. Well, can anybody hold on? Let me see. 1916 movies also heavily based on the. Let's see what Jim's saying. I wrote a paper of the bombing of Hiroshima and the effects of the region, as well as the government officials thought of it. Yeah, like we were talking about the other day, there was a huge debate. Yeah. I'm not as proficient on video games. I can guarantee you Jimbo is. He's the gamer guy who does. He's probably in it. If I can leave it up to those guys. I'm not a gamer, but I appreciate the gaming industry. All right, so I'm going to bring up my number 4 here real quick, and it's not. I don't think it's one that I thought you would have brought up, but you went rogue. You went to. All right, ready?
Sure.
Here we go. War of the Worlds. War of the Worlds is one that was based on. Remember what I said? The 2 tenets of Cold War science fiction were paranoia
and xenophobia.
Well, yeah, the xenophobia, paranoia, and mass destruction. 1953, War of the Worlds brings it. It brings the destruction in a cold and callous, faceless way, and it and the aliens. They made sure that the aliens didn't look anything like us. They did not want us to relate to this. They wanted us, and it was. If you notice in War of the Worlds, it wasn't just the United. This was one of those ones they were trying to show us what mass destruction would have meant for everyone, because these aliens, these Martians, were hitting everywhere. Now, when you think of War of the Worlds, remember War of the Worlds was written in the 1800s by H.G. Wells. It was redone. It was done with a radio thing on Halloween, to the point where Orson Welles did it so real, people thought we were actually being attacked by aliens. That's how good it was. So the story of War in the Worlds was not originally a Cold War movie, but this Cold War concept, but this story was engineered to be one. The way it was meant to look like a war movie against an insurmountable foe that was going to wipe us all out if we didn't figure it out. And we ended up using germ warfare to take them out. So War of the Worlds is my number 4. So that's a very important one. Can anybody guess? Yeah, see, Jim's hyped. He's hyped for that. Oppenheimer. I remember what Oppenheimer said when he first created the atomic bomb. I am now the death destroyer of worlds. Frightening commentary on the nuclear. And Oppenheimer. For
I am death, destroyer of worlds.
Yeah, he went through a lot of shit after that too, and he got caught up in the Red Scare. The Red Scare. I mean, with the whole. There's a movie. Nolan's creating a movie for Universal that's going to come out, and it's going to highlight a lot of that stuff. Yep. So I'm sort of interested in that. Okay, so that was my number 4, right? All right.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody? Any guesses of what my number 3 is?
Mm. The Thing.
Which version?
The Thing from Another World.
All right, that is it. Thing from Another World. I won't bring that one up because we've already done that one. I have the. I'm gonna just let you in on it. I have the John Carpenter's thing on here too because they are both Cold War movies, and what's fascinating about the one that we already covered with you was it's 2 movies called The Thing, and gradually they're drastically different movies because of different times, but they take place at either different ends of the Cold War. John Carpenter's Thing was released in 1982, 31 years after the original Thing from Another World was. That's how broad and that's how influential the Cold War was, and how long it lasted and how many generations it enveloped. That's how the fact that we basically, technically it wasn't a remake, but people still call it one, that we had 2 movies based on the same concept, that the same xenophobia concept, that you could not trust your other guy because the whole spy thing, and they made especially back in the 50s. I mean, if you lived a different way, you were considered. The term communist actually became a derogatory term that was thrown about people that didn't live or look the way that the social status allowed them to be. That created internal paranoia between just American citizens, and that's where you had the McCarthy era, and the whole hearings and everything else, where he went after a lot of people in Hollywood, a lot of influential people. Oppenheimer got caught up in all that. I mean, these are American citizens that were loyal to American, but any differences that you showed in the 50s, you were considered in the West Coast. There were people who went to prison based on suspicions of being, this. So what this Thing movie did, especially back then, it just shows you the paranoia that the guy that's sitting next to you or standing next to you, can he be trusted? Is he really an American? And especially in an open society where people can come and go like us. That's what this movie was spreading. And then we'll go into John Carpenter. It's the same thing. A shape-shifting alien that could look like you, could look like your brother, could look like your fellow soldier, look like your fellow friend. It was that paranoia that the Cold War had the button on that made those movies what they are. So yeah, The Thing from Another World is extremely important. Yeah, listen, the 1980s one, I mean, it's all-time classic. It is up there for me, not just Cold War movies and movies in general, but it's one of the all-time. The blood scene is, whenever I show The Thing and I get a chance to show John Carpenter's The Thing to brand new people, it's always cool to see that blood scene. All right, so I'm down to my last 2, correct?
Yes.
Okay, hold on. So, I lost one of mine. Hold on, I got to bring it back up because number 2. Anybody can guess what number 2 is? I'm going to give you a clue. This is another one. One of 2 of the movies that are on my list that have been remade twice. And the 2 best versions, it's been remade a lot of times, but the 2 best versions of this movie fit the Cold War category because of the sheer fact that they were both made in the heart of the Cold War. Anybody in the chat can guess it? I'm actually going to cheat and give myself both of these. And if you get one right, if you get one of the versions right, I'm gonna give you no prize. What do you think, Dave?
I don't know, man.
And it meets the paranoia doctrine.
I don't know, man.
It's one of the most famous science fiction horror movies of all time. And it has 2 different versions of it, but I'll go ahead and put it up here for you. Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Oh, yes.
There is a 50s version, and then there's a 1977 version. Obviously, they both take place. This is one of my favorite movies in general. The 1950s version is very, very tame. As far as what they show you, basically more paranoia, shape shifting, people that look like you that you thought you could trust that you can't. That was a whole metaphor on the paranoia of are you a communist? Are you whatever? Can I trust you type of things? It's all this peril and danger. The major difference between the two, the effects, and there's nudity in the second one because the 50s you couldn't show that. When they're coming out of the cocoons and they're one particular character is just walking around in the buff because these aliens have no emotions. They have no modesty or anything like that. So there's a scene where one of the characters is chasing Donald Sutherland's character as she has just come out of this cocoon. Whereas before they just show the cocoon and they just show the person, in the normal clothing and all that. This one, they're just walking around the city and the factory in different states of whatever because they've all been taken over and reassumed by these aliens. And it's a little bit more gory, a little bit more violent than the 1950s version, but it's the same premise. It's paranoia. I prefer the 1978 version because that has some all-time great actors. Leonard Nimoy, Donald Sutherland's in it. I mean, it's and it's just done. It is such a scary movie, and the screaming that they do to when they identify each other. I remember the ending of this. Spoiler alert! It's damn near 50 whatever years old. One of the surviving characters, in fact, she's one who plays an alien, the blonde that plays an alien. She finally finds the person that she lost track of, and it's Donald Sutherland, and we had lost track of him. And she's like, "Oh, I found somebody that's one of us, and we can get out of here." And he ends up being one of them. And as you can see in that one scene at the top, he does that shrill scream, and that's how that movie ends. There's no happy ending with this, and it was basically to tell you this Cold War era there wasn't going to be a happy ending. We thought when these movies were coming out, we didn't think it was going to end well. So yeah. And obviously my number one is easy. My fellow pot people. You got Body Snatchers. You did get it right. Yeah, Body Snatchers is another one that came out in the 90s. This movie's been remade a couple of times, but the two that I was talking about were going to be the ones that took place during the Cold War. Because the one that came out in 93 and then the invasion with Nicole Kidman, those weren't Cold War influence. They were Cold War influence because of the story, but they weren't really so much as the ones that came out during the Cold War, in my opinion. And obviously number one is John Carpenter's The Thing. Not just one of the not the best Cold War era influence movie of all time. One of the top 10 science fiction movies of all time, in my lifetime. It is one of the movies that still scares the shit out of me today. I've seen it 1,000 times. I will never stop being afraid of John Carpenter's The Thing. John Carpenter, if you're watching this stream or if you ever watch this stream, skip the Halloween remakes and all that madness that all the other stuff. While you are still living and breathing, I need you and Jason Blum and Blumhouse Films to get together and continue this movie. Kurt Russell is immortal. Keith David is immortal. And we got de-aging things. We don't have to have them in it, but I need to know what happened. I would love for you to be able to tell that story. It's your story. At the end of this movie, that classic ending where it's just basically McCready and Giles' character basically looking at each other because neither one of them, we're supposed to not know who the Thing is, even though if you go by the rules that the movie sets, neither one of them are the Thing. They're both human, in my opinion, because the Thing only kept and concealed its identity when it was around and outnumbered with people and things that could kill it. If one of those was the Thing, there was no one else to stop it. There was no one else to hide from. If one of them wanted to prey on the other, they would have just turned and started mutating and devouring him then and there. The fact that neither one of them do it while they're on screen tells me that neither one of them is the Thing. That's my opinion. One of the great movies of all time. Visual effects these are practical visual effects, air bladders and reverse camera and reverse filming and things like that. This is before CG. I think there may be some CGI in here. I think the spaceship is CGI. but not very much CGI. CGI was not common use in 1982 as much as it is now. It existed, but remember the technology was not what we're thinking of now when we think of CGI. All right, same thing. The Thing still scares the hell out of me. Yeah, it scares me. I mean, like I said, just the explosiveness of the effects, and then just the brutal transformation of the bodies. Yeah, man. Me. So it'll be me and your husband and you. We'll be talking you into it. It is you know what a fanatic I am. You know what a fanatic I am. Yeah, I can't wait to have everybody on board. And converting people into wrestling fans, it's a fun thing to get into. That last comment saying there's no one like you left that sent the chill down my spine. That was 1993's version. That was a Gabrielle Almore and Jennifer Meg Tilly. And the line you're referring to was when Meg Tilly is talking to her husband after she's transformed. She's like, "Where are you gonna go? Where are you gonna run? I need you." She's saying, "I need you to relax and understand the situation. Who are you gonna tell?" Right? There's no one, because there's no one like you left. And that was actually, even though that wasn't one of my picks, that version of it and her portrayal of that was really good. And then you had Gabrielle Anwar, she was falling asleep and being transformed into one of them, and the guy comes in and wakes her up. And when he wakes her up, in any of these remakes, whenever you wake up the prey before the cocoon thing could duplicate them, it killed the cocoon thing if the transformation was complete. So that happened. So those movies were great. But John Carpenter's The Thing, all-time great movie. So yeah, I got to. Yeah. Anybody? Once we start doing our wrestling show, we're gonna invite. My tent is big. My tent is huge. I want everybody in that tent with me to enjoy wrestling. So yeah, you are definitely invited.
You gotta bring me back into the fold on that, because a lot of recent wrestling is just I don't know much about it. Like, again, I'm purely 90s Attitude Era stuff,
Let me transform you there. We'll get that at. Hey, Lexi J, the opening scene with the dog already on the run, the helicopter on the movie already got the mind racing, the adrenaline going. Yeah, and a lot of people don't like the 2011 version of The Thing that tells you exactly how that dog got there and all the other stuff that led up to that moment. I like that movie. I want to see a trilogy. I want to see the third part, and I hope John Carpenter gets around to that and helps us out there. All right, guys, that was it, man. That was thanks to you guys, like Stella says, for remember to like and comment and give us your thoughts. If you weren't able to get them through, and there's my YouTube channel right there if you want to join that. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to wrestling, it's a big world, Nick. And if you watch the right stuff, you can get a lot of fun out of it. But yeah, that's it, guys. That was just a short excursion into the Cold War, what influenced the Cold War movies, some of our favorites. I hope, leave your comment in the comment section of what was some of your favorite. We only covered 5 apiece, and some of us covered each other's movies. So there's tons of movies out there that we would love to hear from you about. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube, like we were talking about last night, that will just drive you crazy and make things not fun. But when we have basic conversations about basic topics about stuff like this, I think this is my contribution to not only the Point Extra Lounge, but to the YouTube community in general, just to have fun and reminisce about some of these moments that scared the hell out of us, and then juxtapose it on the era that created them, which was the Cold War. So I thank Dave for being the co-pilot today, and everybody that participated in the questions and that will continue to participate in the questions during the rewatches and everything. So once we immortalize the stream. So, all right, guys, well, that is it for us until a few hours from now, and then we'll be back on the air for our Game of Thrones recap, and that'll be plenty to talk about there if any of the rumors I've heard are true. Bye, everybody.